Public trust in government stems in large part from transparency and accountability. How do you intend to promote transparency and accountability in county decision-making processes and ensure that residents have access to information about county operations and policies?
So true. So that's what's causing a lot of the issues right now.
I'm going to give you, sorry about that. I got to
Can I get
remember.
3 seconds back?
Yeah, you got your second back. I want to remember to give you the right amount of time. So I think it's a big question, and so I'm going to give you 2 minutes.
Okay, so public trust does not exist today because of what's going on in these meetings. They're being censored, they're being shut down, the people's voice is not being heard. It's very frustrating. I am one of those people that have been to county commissioners meetings over the past 26 years since I've lived here. I've been there many times on road issues and other issues, and I get to speak, and yet it's like I'm talking to a wall, and I understand what that feels like. I promise that I will not make the people feel like that if I'm elected, because I've already been in that chair. Transparency. Transparency comes, again, when we give the people their voice back. I would like to bring back, and I will bring back, if I'm allowed, if I can get another supporter on the board, if I'm elected in, to bring back the people's voice on the agendized items. I think it's so wrong that our elected officials are sitting up there making decisions for the county, and the county government is us, we the people. It's not a business, it's government. It's all of us sitting in this room. How can those 3 people make decisions when they're not getting any input from the people? When certain things are wanting to get passed as far as different land use issues or whatever, how come we're not listening as county representatives to the neighbors? Instead, we're listening to the lawyers, it seems like. Who does it affect? It affects the neighbors, and yet the neighbors' voices are silent. They're allowed to talk. Don't get me wrong, I've watched the meetings. It goes on for an hour, hour and a half, but unfortunately, they're talking to a wall. So bringing back the people's voice, I think, will solve a lot of the issues. It'll go back to business as usual, if you will, 30, 45-minute meetings. The people that actually want to come and talk about government issues will show up at the meetings instead of the people that are ranting and raving that their First Amendment rights are being trampled on, because that won't exist anymore. So that's my opinion.
Thank you.
Well, this is one of the biggest issues, and I would say the main issues in Bonner County. If we can restore the trust of the Commissioner's Office and respect, we will be able to address all other issues. For example, the issues are, not issues, but situation is so bad at the County Commissioners meeting that County Prosecutor had to make a special contact form for the County Commissioners. This is not the way to operate in the Round County. We need to find a way, we need to work with other elected officials for the betterment of the county. We should look past the personal interest and personalities, and this is where we should start. We should engage with the people, because 3 commissioners don't know, in reality, they don't know too much about what's happening in the county. Their knowledge is very small. We need to engage with the public, we need to engage with other elected officials. And we can start simply by listening, acknowledging people's concerns, and then respond to it or provide a solution if we can. This is where it all starts. And I've been to the county commissioners consistently for the past 16 months. I spoke during the meetings, and I encouraged commissioners to work with other electeds. I encourage commissioners to listen to the public and address their concerns. And I also stood up and spoke out against abuses by this board. I stood up and spoke in support of our First Amendment rights. I spoke against arrest of the county residents. I was engaged, and I am engaged. And I promise to work together with other elected officials and bring public input to all the decisions that are being made at the county level.
You have a majority of the Board of County Commissioners here. And believe it or not, we actually get along. Now, yeah, he's right there. He'll be able to answer that for himself. I don't need to speak for Commissioner Steve Bradshaw. And here's what I can tell you. What have we done to improve transparency? If you go to the new Bonner County website and you go to the planning department, we have now televised all of our planning updates. There is a misconception in Bonner County that the regularly scheduled business meeting is the only meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. That is so inaccurate, and it's really unfortunate. I'll give you another example. We just had our monthly planning meeting. Not a single person attended. In that planning meeting, we talk about the infrastructure, which is done through the comprehensive plan. On my way here, I was speaking with an engaged member of the public as I was driving here. I answer phone calls 7 days a week. I have read 6,000 emails, and I can say I'm approximately at only 300 that I haven't answered in my inbox. I have responded to 3,000. I take phone calls, appointments, and there are messages, and there are multiple meetings that actually reflect the business of a Bonner County Commissioner. It is not all done in the business meeting. The business meeting is there to do the business of Bonner County, and I would highly encourage people to take part in that. Here is something that is taking place on Tuesday. On Tuesday, we are addressing the land use component, which is the last component of our comprehensive plan. Do you know how many people have been showing up and participating? 0. Please participate in your local government. We are open for business. Thank you.
There was a similar question on Monday night about this. And being transparent and being honest is going to be hard for anybody to determine that sitting in the forums listening to us, because they're going to get 15 to 18 minutes to hear us respond to questions, give an opening and closing statement. So the best thing we can do is to invite feedback from everyone. Whoever's is the winner on May 21st, we're going to need feedback. We need to hear back from the public. To be transparent, you have to be willing to be honest. You're not going to always agree with people. I don't agree with my wife all the time. We're maybe 80% agreement on things, but it works. We work through things. We talk about it. One of the things I have done, rather than saying what I will do, is in business, it is very similar to being in government, especially when you're in a small community like we are. So if you've driven from Priest River to Sandpoint, you've seen the great big log crane in Laclede, right next to the river over there. Well, I was in charge of the Laclede facility when we put that up. I actually ran the maintenance department for the Chilco facility when we put the crane up down that way towards Coeur d'Alene. Well, if you're gonna show up one day and there's a crane that's 850 feet long and 120 feet in the air, wouldn't you want to have a little bit of input and a little bit of knowledge beforehand as to what's going into your backyard? So when we were moving forward with that project, we actually had meetings with the community to get their feedback on what we were doing. Now this is on private property, it had been permitted, it had been allowed, but we still wanted community feedback so that we could make it to where it was not as intrusive as it could have been. And we had a lot of good feedback from our neighbors and from all the community in the area that showed up to those meetings. There wasn't just one, there were several. Then we had mill tours. We showed them right where it was going to go. It's listening to people in the community. And when we did that as well, my personal cell phone number went out to everyone at those meetings. So if they had any concerns or any feedback, they could contact me. And I called people back because there was a person across the river that we didn't realize would be affected by light reflecting off of the water from that crane. And it did. And they called and we fixed it that night.
So transparency comes from open, clear communication. We need to start by inviting the public to participate in the meetings. But then we need to continue, and we need to deliberate and discuss ideas based on facts. So we need to present facts, clearly deliberate to a decision, state why we're making a decision and voting the way we are on the board. That way the public can test the thinking that was used and determine if they agree or disagree. They can challenge those decisions if they think they were done inappropriately. But if we don't disclose the reason for making decisions, how can you know if it was well made? So we need to state our reasons. One of the things we also need to do is we need to create clear criteria for how decisions are made. For example, If there's a county board or commission, and we're going to appoint members to that board or commission, we should have a clearly written criteria for what is required to be on that board to be considered as an applicant, and then an open public process for making those decisions. We need to be sure that the public understands how and why we're making those decisions, and that we're not doing friends and neighbors and others' special interests, things of that nature. We're not being inappropriate with those decisions because we're clearly going through a public process. So let's use good information to make good decisions based on vetting those ideas through open communication in front of the public. Thank you.
So I'll start out really quickly. That sounds like a question for our representatives, county representatives, because they, based on our state constitution, they're part of the legislative process mostly. They are judicial too, and some executive primarily. And I'm part of the executive branch of government, and so my transparency is, you know that what I follow is the Constitution. You know what's important to me is the liberty of everyone living in our county and those visiting our county, and public safety. So when there needs to be a pushback against either the federal government, or there needs to be a pushback against our state government when the governor wants to close down our state, keep you from traveling freely on the roadways, keep you from meeting under your constitutional right in a church to worship God, I will push back, and that's what I do. So my transparency is seen for the last 15 and a half years as acting as your sheriff, because I'm going to stand on the law, and we're going to base all of my decision based on what's constitutionally right, and I will not change at all. And you could expect the next 4 years for me to be acting the same way.
Probably the single one most standout item that started causing a little friction between me and my sheriff is the word transparency. Starting in January of 2023, you guys are not being transparent. Y'all are not being transparent. You're not transparent over this. You're not transparent. I woke up on a Tuesday morning, March 28, 2023, about 2 hours before the alarm went off, with the word transparency. Going, I am so sick of hearing this word. The next person in our Tuesday morning meeting that says transparency is going to be the winner, because I'm going to show them what transparency looks like. And it happened to be our sheriff. When he came up before the board about 5 minutes into that meeting, and you can pull it up, it's public record, it's videoed, and freely and willfully lied. And the ease at which it rolled off of his mouth astounded me. And when you do that easily, you do it on a regular basis because you're well versed at it. And I called him on it after he finished speaking. And everybody went, ooh, that's our sheriff. I said, prove me wrong, and I will apologize. At the end of the meeting, during the meeting, we had a guy stand up, begin to get loud, and begin to scream. And we could not bring him into order. All the while, the sheriff and the undersheriff sat on the back row laughing. And I asked the sheriff, can you ask him to calm down or escort him to the door? He turned away and laughed. And that was by design and orchestrated. Because he had sat there in previous meetings watching the same thing occur and did nothing. At the end of the meeting, he stood up and proudly proclaimed, as your constitutional sheriff, I will never arrest anybody for exercising their First Amendment rights. And 2 days later, filed a grievance against one of the youngest, sweetest workers in Bonner County for exercising her First Amendment right, and then cost you $125,000 just recently by violating somebody's First Amendment rights. We need a sheriff that's honest and will defend your First Amendment rights.
Thank you. Sheriff Wheeler, you get a 30-second rebuttal.
Only 30?
Yeah, really.
Take as long as you like.
So, you know, we covered this a few days ago. Prior to this meeting, there was a document, recommendation from the prosecuting attorney, Lewis Marshall, giving examples on what you can do to stop somebody from demonstrating and communicating their First Amendment right. And the commissioners at that time continued to violate their First Amendment right. It was at the advice of the prosecuting attorney not to intervene with this, and I would not make myself liable for participating in violating someone's First Amendment right. So I wish we would get facts straight, because it's opposite of what was just communicated.
We're going to start with Ron Korn and go that way, and everybody gets an additional 30 seconds if there's something that you would like to add.
So I'd like to address something that Daryl mentioned. He mentioned that the commissioners are mostly legislators, and that is correct. That's a great point, and we all need to understand that. As legislators, county commissioners and the board actually write county codes and ordinances. They can also change existing county codes and ordinances, and they can amend them. One thing that I would definitely push if I'm elected is that I would push for adding county codes and ordinances in order to protect the people against government overreach and mandates.
My platform is transparency, accountability, and integrity, and I'm running on it. The county business is the business of the people. We do not hang our First Amendment rights at the door before the county commissioners meetings. And talk about transparency. Just earlier this week, commissioners have appointed another person to a fair board without due diligence, without interviews or involvement from, or any kind of input from fair board itself.
County commissioners are executive, quasi-judicial, and legislative according to state code, and I think that's an important thing that we consider. What is the role according to law? And state law determines the process. When we went through that, we were following the advice of our attorney. We continue to follow the advice of our attorney, and I can tell you on Tuesday morning, everybody that signs up and goes through the process is going to have the opportunity to address their county commissioners in the regularly scheduled business meeting according to law.
I ran over before, so I'll go ahead and pass this down.
So transparency is lost when the community is asked to offer their comments after the decisions have already been voted on and made. We need to be inviting input during the process of deliberation and consideration before a vote is made. That's what real transparency is. That's how real trust gets built. Let's do it that way. Brian Domke for District 1 County Commissioner.
My last 30 seconds. The county prosecuting attorney, who is we serve as chief law enforcement officers of the county, validated my last statement by dropping all charges against the trespassing charges against those two individuals. And the last one was they dropped it with prejudice, which means that nobody can go back and prosecute that individual again for trespassing.
In his previous statement, he tried to make that letter from the prosecuting attorney sound like it happened right after that incident where he got up and lied. But that was March of 2023. What he was talking about happened in 2024. That email from Lewis Marshall was talking about the two that got trespassed, and one who actually wrote and emailed a threatening letter, threatening to use violence and a gun. But the sheriff and the prosecutor deemed that not a threat because the guy said at the end of the letter, "Don't take this as a threat."